The sun rose over the small town where Catherine and her family lived, casting golden rays through the thin curtains of their modest home. Inside, everything seemed calm, but Catherine could feel the tension brewing, as it always did. She sat at the dining table, her textbooks spread out in front of her. Her brother Kelvin, laughing loudly with their father in the next room, paid her no mind. It was always like this. From the moment they were young, Catherine knew she would never be her father's favorite. Kelvin was the apple of his eye. He received all the praise, all the attention, while she had to be content with just watching from the sidelines. Kelvin could do no wrong. He had his father's heart in his hands, and it showed in every action. When he wanted something, their father made it happen. Catherine, on the other hand, had learned to stay quiet. Even when she did well in school, her father barely noticed. It hurt, but she had learned to keep her disappointment to herself. She wondered why things had to be this way. She dreamed of one day proving herself, showing her father that she was just as capable, just as worthy of love and attention. But deep down, she feared that no matter how hard she tried, her efforts would always be invisible to him. Catherine's heart raced as she finished her schoolwork. She was a bright student, always coming first in her class. Her teachers praised her dedication, and she secretly hoped that one day her father would notice. Today was special. Her school had announced a scholarship for students who performed exceptionally well, and she had applied for it without telling anyone. She wanted it to be a surprise, one that would make her father proud. But as the day went on, that familiar sense of doubt crept in. Would he even care? Would this be just another one of her achievements that went unnoticed? That evening, Catherine overheard a conversation between Kelvin and their father. "Dad, I want to go to St. Edward's," Kelvin declared. St. Edward's was the most prestigious school in the country, known for producing successful businessmen, politicians, and leaders. Catherine's heart sank. She had always dreamed of going there too, but never dared to ask, knowing how expensive it was. "Of course, son," their father replied without hesitation. "Whatever it takes, we'll make it happen." Catherine felt a lump form in her throat. The unfairness of it all stung, but she kept silent, swallowing her feelings like she had done so many times before. Kelvin was bursting with excitement. His father had just promised to do whatever it took to send him to St. Edward's. The mere thought of being part of such a prestigious institution made him feel important. He strutted around the house with a sense of entitlement, his father's words of encouragement boosting his already swollen ego. Catherine watched from the corner of the room, trying to hide her jealousy. She, too, wanted the chance to go to a great school, to build a future for herself. Later that night, Catherine sat on her bed, staring at her worn-out schoolbooks. She had worked so hard, stayed up late many nights just to keep her grades high. But none of that seemed to matter now. Kelvin always got what he wanted. She wondered if there would ever be a day when her father looked at her the way he looked at Kelvin, with pride and joy. For now, she could only dream. But deep down, a fire was starting to burn within her, a determination to succeed on her own terms, even if it meant going against the odds. The next morning, Catherine woke up early as usual, preparing for another day of school. She dressed quickly, her uniform neatly pressed, and gathered her books with a sense of routine. Her father, however, had other plans. As she was about to leave her room, he barged in, looking more serious than she had ever seen him. "Catherine, you won't be going to school today," he said firmly. Confused, she looked up at him. "Why?" "I'm ready, and my exams are coming up," she replied, panic rising in her chest. Her father didn't budge. I can't afford to send both of you to school. Kelvin needs this education more than you." Catherine's heart dropped. "But I want to go to school. I'll study hard, I promise," she pleaded. But her father's face hardened. "You'll stay at home and help with the chores. That's final." The words cut through her like a knife. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You're not going anywhere," he shouted, leaving her in shock. As he stormed out of the room, Catherine's world shattered. The injustice was too much to bear. She had always been the obedient daughter, but this was more than she could handle. Determined not to let this be the end of her dreams, Catherine packed her small bag with whatever clothes she could find. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the rage and pain burning inside her. She couldn't believe that her own father, the man who was supposed to protect and guide her, would hold her back in this way. With one last look at her home, she turned and walked out the door, leaving behind everything she had known. Her heart ached, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She would not stay in a place where she wasn't valued. Dressed in her school uniform, Catherine wandered the streets, unsure of where to go. She had no money, no real plan, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to give up on her education. She found a small cafe looking for help and offered to wash dishes in exchange for a little pay and a place to sleep. The cafe owner, seeing the determination in her eyes, agreed. Catherine worked hard during the day and studied late into the night, using whatever free time she had to keep up with her schoolwork. It wasn't the life she had dreamed of, but it was hers, and she was determined to make the most of it. Catherine's days were long and tiring. Between washing dishes at the cafe and attending night classes, her body ached from exhaustion. But her heart was strong. Each time she wiped down a table or scrubbed a dish, she reminded herself of her goal. She was no longer the timid girl who sought her father's approval. Now, she was building a life for herself, brick by brick. At night, in the small room above the cafe, she worked through her assignments with fierce determination, her eyes scanning the words by the light of a flickering bulb. She didn't have much, but she had her dreams. While Catherine was fighting for her future, Kelvin was throwing his away. At St. Edward's, the prestigious school their father had worked so hard to afford, Kelvin was more interested in having fun than in his studies. He had fallen in with a group of wealthy boys who spent their time skipping classes, smoking behind the school, and throwing wild parties. Kelvin loved the thrill of it all. The feeling of freedom, of living without rules, was intoxicating. He didn't care about the consequences, even though he knew he was letting his father down. As the months passed, Kelvin's grades plummeted. Teachers tried to warn him, but their words fell on deaf ears. He was too caught up in his new life to care. Instead of studying for exams, he spent his nights sneaking out to clubs, drinking, and hanging out with girls. What started as harmless fun quickly spiraled into dangerous territory. Soon, he found himself deep in debt, gambling away money he didn't have. But even then, Kelvin believed that everything would be fine. After all, his father had always been there to bail him out of trouble before. Catherine's progress was slow, but steady. She didn't have the luxuries her brother enjoyed, but she didn't need them. Every small victory, an A on an exam, a kind word from a professor, gave her the strength to keep going. She had enrolled in night classes at a local community college, paying for them with the meager earnings from her job at the cafe. Despite her progress, Catherine often felt lonely. She missed having a family to come home to, someone to share her victories and struggles with. Sometimes late at night, she thought about her father and Kelvin, wondering what they were doing. Did they even think about her? Did they miss her? She shook the thoughts away. She didn't have time to dwell on the past. She had come too far to turn back now. Her future was bright, and she was determined to make the most of it. Back at home, Kelvin's reckless lifestyle was catching up with him. He had fallen in with a bad crowd, and his once promising future was crumbling before his eyes. His grades were so low that the school had put him on academic probation, but instead of taking it as a wake-up call, Kelvin doubled down on his bad behavior. He started missing classes altogether, spending his days in the back alley behind the school, smoking and drinking with his gang of friends. His father, once so proud, was beginning to worry. Thank you for staying with us through this first part of the story. Do you think what Kelvin's dad is going through is a case of karma, or is there more to it? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your perspective. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Let's keep the conversation going, and we'll see you in the next video.